Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to talk about Codex versus Index, and this is down to a comment that was posted on yesterday's video about the rumoured White Scars Codex, which still seems remarkably unlikely to me, and I have to admit, their interpretation is far more charitable than my increasingly hard-to-ignore interpretation, that essentially what we have is a slow news period for 40k. We're in that lull where Age of Sigmar's been getting stuff, and 40k has not really been getting a huge amount. Yes, we do have the new Slanesh demons and stuff like that. They have got their own datasheets and all that stuff. But in terms of a massive announcement or a huge upcoming release, we don't really know a whole lot. There's not a whole lot going on 40k-wise right now. There is the big update that dropped yesterday, today, one of the two, which, you know, that's something. R.I.P. Castellan Knights. But in terms of planning for big updates, we don't know a huge amount. So you could be uncharitable and say that there is a thing of things must be written, but about what? Let's make something up. I'm not saying it's happened, but it is a possibility. It could also be someone just being a bit of a trickster, a bit of a joker, spreading rumours around even though they don't really have any idea as to whether they're true, or they're just blatantly making shit up. That is also possible. There is also a more charitable explanation for this, which is that actually there is a confusion going on between a chapter getting a codex and a chapter getting an index, as in White Dwarf, the Index Astartes. We've already seen that happen for Crimson Fists. We've seen one for the Assassins. We've now got one for the Inari. Was there another one as well? I can't remember. That, to me, is far more likely and makes far more sense, because we still have the issue of, even being charitable, like White Scars in particular, what is there extra to put in a codex of their own? How would you fill out a codex to be, roughly the same as a Space Marines codex, but only dedicated to White Scars and successors? Is there equipment that different? Do they use things that are that separate to the rest of the chapters? I mean, on the face of it, no, not really. Yes, someone did point out they do modify their equipment. They do mess with their bikes. They go, the lower, they're faster, they're better, all of that stuff. That's fine. They may do that after the fact, but in terms of equipment distribution, they get the same shit as everyone else and then mess with it afterwards, which, in fairness, to be honest, I think is how a lot of chapters do it anyway. That's not specific to White Scars. So having their own codex would be a bit weird. But the White Dwarf Index system would allow those chapters to be expanded upon in a not full book way, but enough to make them more unique than they are, enough to give them more options than they currently have. That was what was done with Crimson Fists, and actually that worked really well. I like the way they did that. If you look at Black Templars being, again, a good example, an Imperial Fist Codex that, puts together Crimson Fist, Imperial Fist, Black Templars, all the rest of the successors, that would be an interesting codex. But of all of those chapters combined, which ones are significantly different to the standard Space Marine Codex? Not that many. Black Templars, however, are significantly different. So would it make more sense to have an Imperial Fist Codex, or would it make more sense to have a Black Templars Index that expanded their options, switched around what they do, gave them more stratagems, more tactics, a different trait, all of that stuff? That feels more likely. And it's exactly the same for White Scars. It seems far more likely that you could expand upon them and make them more unique and give them more options via an index than them getting their whole entire codex to themselves. I think what it is actually coming down to is that question of codex versus index. What makes more sense? When these rumours of different codexes are surfacing, as they have been in the last couple of weeks, do we need to take them as, yes, this chapter is getting their own codex, or do we need to look at it as they're getting their own separate rules, not necessarily in that particular format? It doesn't have to be in that format anymore, is the fact of it. The way that Games Workshop has done things with the indexes means that actually a full-blown codex for every chapter is not just a bit unrealistic, but also, I would argue, kind of unnecessary, because we already have a system in place for delivering separate rules and separate traits and all of that stuff without the need to go out and buy another big book. I mean, if you've already got the system for indexes set up, which they have, it would make far more sense for us to see those different chapters in their own separate indexes than anything else. I mean, we've already seen, Chaos Knights, for instance, got an index of their own. It was a digital one. You can download it, you can print it off, it's yours, you can play with it, it's legal, it's fine. why would Games Workshop make a full book for Chaos Knights when they are the same functionally as Imperial Knights, they're just dedicated to Chaos? Well, they wouldn't, and so they didn't. Instead, we've got an index. It's exactly the same thing, I think. And I think that is a good thing to think about, where it's like, if we see this thing of, okay, Imperial Fist Codex, White Scars Codex, Raven Guard Codex, just as an example. I mean, that might be the next one. You know, we could gamble, say, yeah, they'll get a rumour next week. It'd be funny if this turned out to be the source for a rumour that showed up saying that the Raven Guard get their own codex, but that's unlikely to happen. Those are chapters that, yeah, the codex would be cool. Would it be necessary? Not really. Could they be expanded on sufficiently through use of either a White Dwarf Index or a digital index? Yeah, actually, that would work pretty well. And it would also essentially cut down on the amount of extra, well, I say extra paperwork. You'd still need to have those indexes, and you still need to have that White Dwarf if they were in there. But it seems more reasonable than releasing a codex for every single chapter. It is a little bit different. There are some weird double standards, I'm happy to admit that, and that's something that actually does give me pause every time I think about this, and every time someone asks me about it, or whenever I read the comments. It's like, on the one hand, it is kind of hypocritical to say, okay, well, these chapters do not kind of diverge sufficiently enough to warrant their own codex, because we already have Dark Angels Codex, and a Blood Angels Codex, and a Space Wolves Codex. It's not like that hasn't happened before, but those feel like, in a way, those feel like almost legacy things, whereby they've been that way for so long that they can't be folded back in. They've developed to the point where it's unreasonable to suggest that they would be placed into their own codex because they have so much stuff that is extra or different. And it's not the same thing as Chaos either. I mean, a few people said, well, you know, Death Guard got their own codex, so 1,000 Suns. They do, yeah, but they are dedicated to specific Chaos gods, and their codexes change the way that army works and changes the units available. It makes it a different force. It's not just more chaos with a little bit on the side. They are thematically different as well. They are, yeah, they just don't quite fit the same way. By design, they don't fit the same way in the Chaos Codex as say Night Lords or Word Bearers, and that's because of what Games Workshop has done with them, obviously. So, you know, they could switch things up and just start throwing out codexes for every single chapter, every single legion, every single warband, but it seems unlikely that they do that, because a lot of what they could achieve would be doable just via an index. And to be honest, I would suspect that should there be an index made available for like the White Scars, yeah, there might be disappointment that there's a codex, but there would also be a significant amount of support, I think it's fair to say, because that chapter would be getting that additional support. They'd be getting those extra rules, that extra attention. They would be getting something that they haven't traditionally got. I mean, I didn't see anyone sitting there going, oh, this is bullshit, Crimson Fist should have had their own codex. What I actually saw was people going, oh, this is really cool, they've expanded on Crimson Fist. I mean, if they can do that with every major chapter, all the ones that people want to see a bit extra for, that makes far more sense to me. So I'm wondering whether we treat future Codex rumours following the same lines as, you know, Imperial Fists and White Scars, which the basis for those have just been Rogel Dawn comes back, which, you know, could have a serious effect, or Primaris are getting new stuff, which could have a significant effect, but it would have an effect on all of them. I don't know, it just, to me, it feels a little bit more likely, it feels a little bit more reasonable, but could it be that that is a mistake that's being made, that index and codex are being used interchangeably when actually that's not the case? I don't know, but it feels like that's more likely. Anyway, what do you reckon? More likely for indexes than codexes? Do you think that makes more sense rumour-wise? Do you think we could end up seeing like expansions on chapters through indexes as opposed to just giving them their own book every time? Do you think that's more reasonable to expect from Games Workshop? Or do you think actually they would find it more worth it to go kind of whole hog and go for the full book for each chapter eventually, given that that seems to be what these rumours are leading to, every chapter just getting a codex by the look of things? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all of that shit. Click it if you like, don't click if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.